So I think that the bloom for hydrogen has diminished in recent years, and General Motors is putting the emphasis on the Volt, and that's supposed to hit the market in 2010. I think it's still an open question what price range they're going to be able to produce that car. Usually when you have a new technology, it's going to be more expensive at first. But however, just in terms of fueling the car, it will be cheaper to run your car on electricity than it will be on what you're paying at the pump. So I think I am not as wild about electric cars as some people, because ultimately there's probably a coal plant providing 50% of the energy. But I think Detroit's going to move in that area, and if you're using basically the same power sources to make the electricity as you would use to make the hydrogen, I'm not sure that you get enough gains from hydrogen to justify that major change in our infrastructure. Yes?
Hi, I have a question. Wind energy here in Michigan has not exactly taken off yet, although I understand there is a new initiative to bring some wind energy here. Europe seems to be pretty much ahead of us in terms of windmills, and I was wondering if you would comment on the future for that.
Well, you're correct. Windmills are very popular in Europe, particularly in Denmark. They are very heavily subsidized. They are willing in Europe to pay a lot more per unit for electricity in order to meet environmental goals. And there's some question whether we're willing to do that here or not. But I think that wind has great potential. I think that the best way to bring wind to market would be to pass the renewables portfolio standard. This is a requirement that 15% of the electricity in the United States be generated from renewables. And right now, wind and plant fuels would be the winners out of that requirement. Last year, it had a majority support in the House, and it had a majority support in the Senate. And you might say, well, then why didn't it pass? Well, in my book, I try to keep reminding people of the politics, and in the Senate, it only takes 41 votes to filibuster a bill, and they could not break the filibuster. They just fell short, so it had like 58 votes for it. So here's something that would have been really good that couldn't get through the political system. I think it will pass next year. Many states are either have or are looking at these renewable portfolio standards. So I think that is the best way. And you always learn more as you go along, and I think you have to have a empirically based approach to this. Any fuel is going to have problems if you use it for 50% of your energy. I mean, if you just used a little bit of oil and a little bit of coal, a little bit of natural gas, they wouldn't be problems. So I think we need to get started very early in these alternate fuels and then evaluate them. And is this working out the way we think it is? And if it is, we're going to ramp it up. And if it isn't, we'll slow it down. But we've got to get started at a faster pace than we are now. And frankly, the Europeans have been doing more than we've been doing. And I think it's hurt us in our world leadership in a lot of different ways that aren't related to energy, that we have not taken leadership on this particular issue. And of course, that raises the question of how you bring China into all of this. But just to keep it brief, if you want to ask more about this, I think the best way to influence China is by setting a good example. I think they look at our society very carefully in terms of setting their long-term goals. And if we preach to them to do things that we're not doing, it's going to have very little impact. But I think if we can demonstrate that we can deal with our energy problems and have a healthy economy, then that sends a message to them that that's the way to go. And that's a tough issue. I don't want to minimize it, but that'll be part of the solution.
Should the next administration prioritize upgrading outdated and inefficient transmission lines before they look to implementing wind and solar?
Well, I don't know that it sort of goes in partnership. The wind power, as Boone Pickens is talking about, is mainly in the plains states, basically from Texas up to the Dakotas. And the people that use electricity tend to be in big cities like Chicago and other places. So there's going to have to be lines, transmission lines built to transmit this power. We also need a smarter grid. I mean, it's technically possible to have, you know, what happens to the wind power that is created at night that we don't use? Well, you could actually have a smart grid that would just repower your car in your garage when the windmills were blowing. That's not that. Now, it is a capital investment to put that kind of grid in. When you finish my book, you should read Tom Friedman's Hot, Flat, and Crowded, and he puts a lot of emphasis on a smart grid. So we need a grid that's strategically located and can do more things than our current grid. And the trouble is, what's the private sector's responsibility and what is the government's responsibility? And you know, I think you have to find ways where the government sets down general guidelines that encourage the private sector to do this, but you know, ultimately it's going to be the electric companies that do the installations. Yeah.
It's not a question, but this is a rah-rah.
Okay.
Michigan passed their RPS on September 18th and was signed into law just last week by Governor Granholm, making us the 29th state with an RPS. 10% by 2015, not real big, but we're on our way.
Okay.
And I guess one question, though, is we had 150 coal plants proposed in the United States in 2005. 70 of those have been shot down because of it being a bad investment, plus it's environmentally just not a good thing to do. How do we turn this business as usual theme around with coal plants and get them to move more into renewables and get out of doing it the way they've always done it?